Welcome back to Radio Wasteland with our guest Samuel Hofman. Okay, so this next one is interesting, and I don't know if I'm throwing a name at you here, but we got two comments about the same topic. One is Carol G. says, Carlos Muñoz Ferrada. He discovered the humongous planet Hercolubus. It's in the Colburn Bible. Look it up. I love how people get... I don't know. It's like all caps. I love how people... how serious people can come across in comments. And then the follow-up is from Avengers Captain. Here's an interview Carlos Ferrada did, and he puts a link. And then he says, so if we add up Carlos and Sam's info, you can come to the conclusion that the dead star Carlos is speaking about is Hercolubus, and the comet planet is the binary solar system. There's a few pieces Carlos is off on, but when you hear Sam's info, then Carlos is info, you can tell that that it's in there. Is this a name that you're familiar with?
Yes, I've looked at his works on a couple occasions. People have tossed it at me. It's entirely possible. Hercolubus is a massive, it's not a dead star. It is an unborn star. It is a gas giant that is so big. And now it boils down to being an electron cluster. It's a central electron cluster that holds the two atoms or the two stars in place, which is part of what our overall compound of our solar system, this binary plural, is. We are a compound. And our atomic structure actually is what helps Earth produce gold in our third ring in the soft metals group. And it's literally like we're placed in certain little placements, like on the periodic charts, in a compound elemental structure. We're not rocks floating nilly-willy in space, gathered by gravity. We're an electrical solar system. We're an electrical compound. It's protons and neutrons placed in shell structure. So him calling it a dead star, of course, is some level of misinformation, and probably that has been manipulated since 1444, where a lot of the real truths about this scenario, because this information has been passed down, through multiple generations, but it's been tainted and manipulated for only those who know, and from the Colburn, for instance, and the Hasidic Jews, and then in 1444, when the Spanish Inquisition occurred, that's when they started no longer working together with the other religions. Before that, the Jews and the Arabs and everybody shared all of their information. But then if you go back into your history and you look at 1444, because there was two Spanish Inquisitions, the first one, they started burning all this information and calling for heresy, and they murdered thousands and thousands, if not millions of people. So our information has been available, but it's been changed and manipulated to confuse the people who do not know.
Following that, we also have, I figured we should address this while we're at it. Harp Harper says Nibiru is Jupiter. So.
Yeah, that is all. Yeah, that's exactly. That's one of those manipulations, because they talk about Saturn being this archetype, and if you view aliens, God, what's the heck? Anyway, I'm trying to think of the name of that group. Anyway, there's quite a few pieces of material out there where they do discuss the archetypes, and a lot of that information has been manipulated and changed over the years, and so some of the human information that a lot of people end up looking up and studying can manipulate them in the wrong direction, and that's where I try to avoid a lot of human information and actually pretty much stick to the information I was given from off-world, which has been very prominent.
A lot of the time you're talking about the manipulation of information, and is this manipulation a long-term plan, or is this the random stacking of different groups basically manipulating for their own finite time situation?
I'd have to say both.
Asking that very well, but maybe you get what I'm asking.
No, I'd have to say both. There is an intentional manipulation by the main faction, and then there are, numerous other factions who all wish to have a level of control, knowing if you were a private sect, you could, and I hate to say the Masons or whomever, or if you're, over there in Italy and you work for the church, and then, you want information out in certain ways to certain people, then this is how they get it out, and they pass off these little metaphors. And if you don't understand the premise and the basis of these metaphors, then this information is useless. So a lot of it, you have to just take into account the binary system. As long as you basis any of your research knowing that there is two suns, and then the 8 count on one side and the 8 count on the other, if we exclude Pluto on our solar system and everything, then you'll start to see how the metaphors pan out and the drawings pan out, and some of these mystic drawings, because these artists wanted the information to get out, and they wanted to pass on to other generations that they knew, and yet at the same time, if they were to put this out, then they could end up being labeled a heretic by the church and no longer be allowed to even live in society. So or burned at the stake. Excuse me, it's time for another cough drop. Back then we had to be a little careful, otherwise they get burned at the stake for this stuff.
Right. Okay. Let's see. We got Robin Wares. She says, Samuel Hofman, I'm very glad you did another show. Thanks, Chauncey. Keep him coming back. I like that part. And then, Sam, I would be very interested in hearing about the blood type thing. I have been researching since I was 19. I'd be very interested in your perspective. Is this something that you know?
Yeah, I kind of know about it. I kind of hate to throw it out there into the world, but let's just say that through the course of history, there have been manipulations of the human genome. We are not the first model. That we are not even the sect. There were hundreds. Anyway, this bloodline change has to do with a decree that came in from the, shall we say, demigods above our demigods. And they were told that the people who created us should allow us to evolve out of this short life scenario where we're slaves on the factory planet Earth, and some of us should be allowed to elevate up into the Federation. This bloodline manipulation is something that they have, to us, has been many, many generations, but to them it's a very short time period of them just adding an upgrade. So the bloodline, and for those of you who go into the research, now remember, some of this information can be misleading because as far as human information goes, a lot of it has been manipulated. The bloodline information has to do with an upgrade, and some of us are supposed to elevate into the Federation in the coming future.
And do we have any idea how we see who's who and what's what?
Well, I can give a hint. It has to do with the RH bloodline. And then I'll give another hint, and that has to do with what's known as the Sumer bump. There is a bump on the back of some people's skulls that is about an inch above your top vertebrae. And if you have the Sumer bump, then you are of that bloodline.
But there's no way of knowing without going in there?
Well, you just reach the back of your head, and if you've got a little bump between in that little valley, it's like an inch above your last vertebrae. If you've got a bump, then you are probably very likely of that bloodline.
I'm going to have to get my wife to check me.
Okay, well, it's about the size of the tip of your finger, of your pinky, and it'll be there's a valley on the back of your skull, about an inch above your last vertebrae. There's that depression, and if in the dead center above that you have a little tiny bump, then you have the bloodline.
Huh. Okay.
My mother was very proud of mine.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, that's funny. I'm checking, but I'm not confident in what I feel.
Well, not everyone who is awake will I'm stepping into the metaphysical realm here. Not everyone who is awake has one, but you can have pieces of the puzzle. It's when you have moreover, because there's like 7 different pieces that you would have had to have gained through manipulation of your genome through history. one family to the next, and not all families have it. And in some cases there's just one person in the family, and in some cases there's none. And it'll skip generations. But it's a genome bloodline, and the people who are awake, they have different behaviors, and they have different intelligence ratios and other things like this. But everybody has their own little gifts. Not everybody has it all in one package. This time it's supposed to be drawn out a little farther for more people, and we can hint toward the 144,000, et cetera, and that's all this other crazy stuff that you can go off in the deep end of metaphysics, and then, of course, we're talking about rumor and gossip.